On Tight Lines today, we'll be out on the bank with top carp angler Adam Penning for a superb fish field session he enjoyed last week at one of his local waters in Essex. And with the road to this year's Fishomania final now underway, we'll have a report on the first two qualifiers at Yorkshire's Hayfield Lakes and Viaduct Fisheries in Somerset. I'll also have a few tips of my own on the conditions and sport you can expect to find at the moment on different types of waters around the UK. Joining me in a body to give his perspective on things is Rob Hughes, the new manager of Carp Team England and an angler with a passion for catching specimens from a variety of venues and countries. He also likes to explore what actually goes on beneath the surface, so this warming weather should make his diving a bit more comfortable as well as his fishing. It's good to see you, mate.
Yeah, nice to be back in again, and isn't it nice to see the sun?
Oh, it's been gorgeous. Enough of how gorgeous it's been this week. It must make it that much easier for you when there's a few fish about and the water's a bit warmer when you are underneath.
For me, this is the best time of year to be out. Not just fishing, but diving in particular, because the water's still relatively clear. There's not that much algae yet, but it's just starting to warm up. The sunlight's getting in, the fish are starting to move around, and it's great to study them and see what they're doing.
Is that the reason why you went to Gran Canaria? Because I know you've been there. Did you do anything under the water there? I mean, we know what you did under the water by catching fish like these.
Yes. Well, it was actually a family holiday, but, the angler in us, we can't help it. So I went up to Chira for a day and managed to catch 7. This was the hardest fighting fish I think I've had for a long, long time. Just under 30 pound. It was over a metre long, and it just an absolute tear-away of a beast.
Look at the paddles on it, yeah. Do you know, I recognise that spot. I've actually fished that spot with Keith Gladden a few years ago.
Yes.
And I caught a fish not unlike that. There's a lot of that kind of fish, and
yes.
It was about 27, 28 pound. And as you say, they pull your arms off. Unbelievable.
It's quite high altitude. It's nearly 1,000 metres above sea level, and they're tearaways. They really are, and they're just muscly.
They are as well. Now, Carp Meister Adam Penning is so busy with his tutorials these days, it was quite difficult to arrange a day on the bank. But we managed to catch up with him last week, though, at Blasford Hill Fisheries near Chelmsford, and it proved well worth the wait.
Mint common carp, just over £18. Spring carping on a day-only venue. Got here nice and early, got the rods out in the mist, and this is the biggest of 2 that I've had so far in the last couple of hours. Beautiful. On a lot of lakes now, seagulls make it quite tricky to put out a big hit of bait, and they actually force you to feed little and often. So I tend to put out 10 or 20 baits every half an hour. If the seagulls come in, I'll stop. But the idea is just to keep a little bit of bait falling through the water, and both times that I baited this morning, I got a bite immediately after, so it can spur a bit of activity from the fish and keep them looking. I'm just using Vortex boilies that I've covered in hemp oil, so loads of attraction and little and often. That's the key. One thing I've learned down the years from doing a bit of match fishing is that time can be really, really important, especially on short little day sessions like we're doing today. Once I get a fish, I want to get a rig back onto that spot as quickly as possible and maximise my fishing time. And it really can result in an extra fish or 2 over the course of a day. So this venue is a 2-rod only, and most of us carry 3 rods. I have my 3rd rod set up, ready to go at all times, clipped up to the spot. As soon as I get a fish, leave the fish in the net, and I get a rod back out there. It really can get you a few bonus extra bites. Be organised. Well, the sun's come up. A beautiful, beautiful spring day. It's getting quite warm, and it's burnt all the mist off. And to be honest, I was starting to fear for my chances, and just as I was sat drinking a cup of tea thinking about that, the right-hand rod's gone off, so feels like a nice fish. Well, there you go, that chap didn't fight very much. I think all this warm sunshine has made him just want to sunbathe, a bit like me at the moment. There you go, the fish is resting perfectly safely in the net at my feet. third rod, the spare rod, made up, ready to go. I'm going to get it out as quickly as possible and see if I can bag another one. Okay, the line's all sunk. I'm going to put this back on the bite alarm. Before I do, I just want to mention one thing. A lot of people fish just out of habit, really, with really slack lines. And it can cost you fish and work against you a lot of the time, especially on lakes like this, which are barbless hook only. If you're fishing a really slack line and you're using a barbless hook, then the fish have got a very good chance of getting away with it. Anyone who's used barbless hooks will know you leave a fish in the net for a couple of minutes, get your camera sorted out, and you go back and it's got rid of it in the net, and they will get off. So again, fishing up against an island, it'd be folly to fish with a slack line, so I'm fishing very direct lines to both the rigs with a good weighty bobbin so that I get good positive indication when a fish comes along. There we go, the rod's back out on the spot, and now we can appreciate the fish. Absolutely beautiful mid-double common. Looks like the approach is working quite well so far. It's got lovely and warm now, and the fish have come up onto the shallow arm at the top end of the lake. So always be aware of where the fish can go, bait up a few spots. So I've got some ground bait and a few more boilies. Again, when the fish are in close and they're on the surface, dress drab. You should dress drab anyway, really, try and blend in. Polaroids, essential. Nice smelly ground bait mix and a few boilies. I'm just going to put it under some of these trees and see if we can get some inquiry. Well, I was just next door putting some bait under one of the bushes and got another bite. All the bites have come on one rod so far, and this is plodding around. Let's hope it's a big one. Got that, didn't you? Well, we've got ridiculously high air pressure, a real warm spring day. It's over 1,040 millibars, and didn't really look good for another bite, which was why I was off baiting a few spots under the bushes, and I was just next door doing one of them, and this fella obliged. Another beautiful upper double common, and it's going to make me persevere with the island spot a little bit longer. Fish an hour, suiting me nicely. This is the rig that I'm using. It's a multi-rig, aka Johnny Mac rig. Use it for most of my boilie fishing. I like to tie it with a really short loop over the hook so it sits just above the bottom. Always ensure that you strip away just below the putty so it can stand up proud like that. Hook length nice and short, about 6 inches, because I'm fishing on a hard bottom, lead on a clip, and some anti-tangle tubing. You'll notice that all my components are quite light coloured, and instead of trying to worry about what bottom you're fishing over and making it match, which is nigh on impossible, choose some light colour components like this and then colour it in with a pen. So what I do is I use a nice light coloured 20-pound Christ and Sinks hook link, and I get a pen. These Jag pens are ideal for this, and I just fleck it up. And camouflage is about breaking up an outline. It's not about matching a colour. And this will make your components blend in nicely on the bottom. That's a bite. Still reasonably heavy. Oh, what a scrap. Brilliant. Really didn't expect to get this many bites in a day, especially with massive high air pressure, and but it proves that fishing in shallow water against islands when the fish are cruising about, only in about 2 foot of water, little and often baiting is a great tactic as well. Fish precisely, fish sharply, and I've had a brilliant day, absolutely loved it.
It is amazing, though, because you look at that and everything was wrong. I mean, Adam messaged me in the morning and said, it's only a week ago, exactly a week ago. And you look at the conditions, there's no green on the trees, not a leaf out, and now it's a
different planet now,
exactly,
isn't it? It's like a different planet.
But the fog and everything was wrong. But that wasn't all he caught, by the way, because just after we left him, he put this thing in the net, and this is the biggest fish in the lake, £30 and change, and a glorious fish, and just a phenomenal day. Exactly what you could have hoped for, really.
It was interesting. He's talking about air pressure there, and I think that at this time of year it doesn't matter that much,
really,
because primarily they're interested in the light and they're interested in the heat, and they will override. And at different times of year, air pressure might be more important than temperature, and then at other times of year it will be the water temperature as opposed to the air temperature or wind direction. But now at this time of year, it's light and heat they want.
Mate,
they'll forego that. They'll come up in the water.
So interesting. Welcome back, Carp angler Rob Hughes is my guest in the body today. And do you know, I'm still intrigued about what you find out when you go underwater, because, you try and put so many things together when you're fishing. Carp anglers, specimen anglers, in a different way to match anglers. You're always trying to optimise the situation. If you can get some idea and some understanding of what actually happens below the surface, it doesn't eliminate the mystery, because it makes you ask because of or in spite of, but it just gives you clues, doesn't it?
It does. I think the key is if you can find out where they're comfortable, then you've got a significantly better chance of catching them. And that might be a depth, it might be a temperature, it might be the conditions that they're in, it might be predators around them, it might be the way they're feeding. And there's all might be's, of course. It isn't an exact science in any way, shape or form. But there are certain things that you can look at and you can think, well, if I put this, this and this together, then that will give you if it's 10% each, that's a 30% more chance of catching.
Now, just before we had a cup of tea, you were talking about light and heat radiation and the effect that had on fish. And I think this demonstrates it. This bit of film we've got here absolutely demonstrates it perfectly.
Absolutely.
I mean, there's a carp and another one behind it.
This is actually December for a start, but it's very, very applicable now, because you would expect the fish to be in the deep water, and the old age view was they're all going to be in the deep water or they're going to be buried in the silt. No, what they are is they are just below the surface, where there's a cold layer on the surface. If you imagine the air temperature is what warms the water when the sun is weak. And as a result, the surface layers are cold. If you split a lake in its depth into thirds, that's always the best thing to do. They're either in the top third, the middle third, or the bottom third. Now, we like to think that they feed in the bottom third a lot of the time. But primarily because that's where we're presenting a bait.
It's the only place we can present a bait and some feed, isn't it?
Well, that's it. Well, with a zig rig, potentially you can bait over the top of it.
Your loose feed is either when you're dropping past or going back up past it.
Ultimately, it all ends up on the deck, so what we think is that's where they're going to be. But you know what? If you can find out where they are comfortably, then that's where you're going to have much, much more of a chance of catching them, because you know what? Location's the most important thing. And if they're there, you've got a chance of catching them. If you want them there, you've got to get them to come down.
Exactly.
And you've got to get them to feed on the bottom. So, just with regards to that film, we found through the course of the winter, in clear water, that 3 to 4 foot below the surface was the best depth. That's where they wanted to be.
Now, there's a lot of talk about thermoclines, and I used the thermocline theory many years ago. I'm a bit dubious as to what size lake thermoclines actually come into play on.
Well, thermoclines is a bit of a misnomer. Let's just have a look at this clip now, and this is a diurnal variation in temperature as opposed to a thermocline, and that is the difference between day and night. But look across the top of that roach shoal. It is absolutely
like a tabletop.
Absolutely. It's like a snooker table. Interestingly, skimmers were underneath it. Roach was sitting there. Skimmers were underneath. They would not go any higher, and that was a foot to 18 inches. Now, the reason behind that is it's the morning. So what's happened is nighttime, temperatures got colder. Cold air is starting to chill the surface layers. So you have a reverse situation where the cold water is actually sitting at the top, and the comfortable bit that the fish want to be in, where the light is at its strongest, is just below that. So they were sitting 18 inches below the surface. They would not go any higher. They didn't want to go any lower because it was colder down there as well, but there was that middle bit where it was very, very comfortable, and that's where the light is at its strongest before they go up into that cold layer. Now, that will change in the next 3 to 4 weeks. We're in a situation now where we're getting the turnover. The bottom will warm up, the gas will expand, it will turn over, and as a result, once the lake's warmed all the way through, you've got a completely different situation again. But now, you know, I hear people talking about zig rigs saying, oh, fish it just under the surface. That might be the case on a flat, calm period in the afternoon, but certainly not in the morning.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because you've brought in one of your examples of a zig rig. I normally only do this with trout flies, but I'm going to stick that in my specially prepared thumb.
Yes.
Just to show how this would sit in the water, because it would actually sit sort of like that, wouldn't it?
Yes, sort of like that.
Maybe straighter.
Let me just bend that in a little bit so you get the full effect of it, because that.
You've got to stick it in the right place.
There we go.
Otherwise, I'll cry.
Sorry.
That's all right.
This is called a zigger liner, and it's basically just like a hooker liner, a magger liner, but in the back of it, there's a little saddle, as we call it, that you can put some foam into, and that will basically sit up off the bottom.
Yeah.
Now, they come in various different colours, but black and red are, without any shadow of a doubt, the best colours to use. The reason behind it, black in particular in clear water, that stands out more than anything else. And also, it's a natural colour.
You want proof that it stands out? Look at that.
There's a black one, clear water, and if you're zig rig fishing at this time of year and the water is clear, which the majority of the time it is in carp lakes, gravel pits in particular, then black is what you want, because what you're trying to do is you're trying to match the hatch.
Yeah.
And, you know, you speak to any fly angler, and what they want to do is try and get a fly as close to whatever's happening naturally underwater as they possibly can.
Right. I just want to interrupt you there, because you've said the magic word, match the hatch. Now, that's a zig rig sitting in the water. This is the right way up. You can see the zigger liner underneath it, all black, like the other one. That bit of white reflecting on it is a bit of light penetrating through. Now, that's a piece of foam stuck in a bit of plastic attached to a lump of steel.
That's basically it.
This is a caddis grub, having emerged from its little caddis shell on the bottom, made of bits of twig or bits of stone, depending on the type, bits of shell, depending on the type of caddis, making its way to the surface. The white bits at the top of your picture are on the grub itself are its breathers, its gills, if you like, where it's making its way to the surface. And when it gets to the surface, that will just split open, and one of those daft sedge flies that land all over you were landing all over me this week when I was fishing at Berry Hill. That will creep out and fly away across the surface. Now, that, to me, is as good as any fly angler could get.
Well, yes, is quite simply the answer to that. You know, what do you want to do? You want to try and match what they're feeding on normally. What are they feeding on? They're feeding on exactly that. And that was an incredibly lucky shot for me to take. I've searched through all sorts of websites, entomology sites, all over the internet, and you know what? There's only that one shot of that in existence that I've found.
Wow.
Very difficult because, you know, as you've said, it's lived its life on the bottom of the lake bed. It's scurried around covered in sticks, camouflaged up everywhere. It's then swum out, it's broken out of its shell, it wants to get the surface as quickly as possible so it can spread its wings and
you ain't
disappear.
got long, you've got to be in the right place at the right time. Yeah.
You're not on the bottom, you've got to get very, very close to it. And it was that shot that spawned the idea of having the zigger liner, because we thought, well, you know, I don't want to knock anybody else's ideas, but I see zig bugs and all sorts of things like that, and forgive me, but anything underwater generally has a tail. Yeah. It doesn't have wings. Stuff in the air has wings. Yeah. So match the hatch.
And it's an outline, matching the outline. Exactly what flies do.
That's the idea.
Now, it's not all about zig fishing, and it's not all about fishing the top or fishing at various depths, because, I mean, you brought this picture in of a fish, I should imagine, of which you are very proud.
Yes, indeed. Very, very pleased with that one. It's a fish called Apples, and it's a lake called Homefen over in Cambridge. And I saw a picture of it last year, and I thought I would love to catch that. And a friend of mine caught it, and I was over the moon, tinged with a little bit of, I'd love to catch that at the same time. And that was my target for the year this year. And I'm not the sort of angler that goes out and specifically targets fish, but I thought I'd like to catch that, and that's on the hit list. And lo and behold, first time out, bang, happy days,
now
£40.15.
I know you fished, how big?
£40.15.
Now, you fished a PVA bag. Normally, a PVA bag would look like that, with the lead and the lead clip inside the bag with the pellets and everything. But what's that about?
Bag with the difference, you see. Again, all down to diving. This time of year, there's a lot of emergent weed around, and I call this a parachute bag. So what happens is basically you cast out. It's a bit tricky. It's not a long-range bag, obviously.
Oh, no, you can never cast it a long way because of the two different weights.
That's it. Yeah. You must hit the clip when you cast out with it, so it spreads itself out. And then what happens is it sits on the surface, light lead, that's only a couple of ounces, and it sits
because of the air in the bag, it will sit there for a while,
Air in the bag holds it up. So basically, I'll call it a parachute bag because it sinks very, very slowly, and then it pops up off the bottom like that. The air all goes to the top, pops, the pellets fall down, critically balanced rig, slowly settles down, bang, perfect on top. And you've got a nice little presentation of bait around. It's ideal for silkweed, you know, that sort of thing, that are very, very difficult to present over, because you chuck a bag into silkweed and what happens is it buries itself. So you want something that's going to slowly sink on top, break, and give you a perfect presentation. The other thing with it is that where you've got pellets in it, what they do is they flatten the silkweed down. And what I've seen with that candy floss weed, as a lot of people call it, is that it tends to move around a lot. So just casting a choddy over the top of it, with a choddy, it'll just get buried.
Filamentous algae.
Yes, menace.
Nasty, horrible stuff, like bits of flannel when you pull it out.
Absolute menace it is, and it moves.
It does, yeah. That's a really incredible presentation. I can see some good match fishing applications for that as well, using a very, very similar type of approach, creating like the method feeder approach, but with a bag instead. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, with a critically balanced bait in it, what happens is when the bag pops and all the pellets fall to the bottom, it flattens the bottom for you, and it gives you a lovely little presentation area to drop your bait down on.
Brightly coloured bait or matching bait on top.
Yeah, anything.
All in there now. And as usual, the Easter break rekindled many anglers' desire to get out on the banks, and fisheries have seen plenty more customers since then. They've been catching well in the main. Tench and crucians are feeding. Sweet corn's an excellent bait, using small amounts of corn and softened coarse fish pellets as feed. Now, I prefer soaking hard pellets for a few minutes using expanders, as they're guaranteed to sink, and the rule of thumb for that soaking is 1 minute per millimetre of pellet. So 2 minutes for 2 millers. Drain the water off and give them a good shake up so they don't stick together and fall baste. Feed either with a catapult or a cupping with a pole. Weeds growing but still subsurface, so maybe up your line strengths a little bit. So £4 on the reel or your rig, £3 on the hook lengths, and a nice strongish size 16 will do nicely. Roach are definitely looking up now, so fish shallow for them with maggot or caster. Carp have been up and cruising, but it'll be quite as keen to mooch about on the surface in the coolness of the weekend remains to be seen. But they should still show, especially at first light. Now, I saw a lot of carp about in the week. Rob, what's your tips for this weekend?
I think without any shadow of a doubt, just try zig rigs. If you've not done it before, try it. Yeah. You know, loads and loads of people, they say, oh, we've tried everything. We even chucked a zig out. What they did was they got a carrot of some sort of orange foam, threw it out for an hour and a half, didn't have anything, and then left it.
Would you be feeding over it?
No, not at the moment. Definitely match the hatch. You know, you mentioned about your nymphs down there, and if that's what we should be going for, damsel. I was particularly intrigued in what you said about that. Now, first thing I'll say, I'm not a fly angler. I've never been. Don't know one thing from the other. But the hothead, you know, just looking at it colour-wise, similar-ish. Why do you put that orangey flash on there?
Because it's a target. It's a trigger, a feeding trigger. That's the assumption.
Exactly the same thing with the red.
Yeah.
On the on the ziggerliners as well. You know, that little bit of red, it's incredibly visible underwater. You can see it from a long, long way off, particularly when the water is just slightly murky. Not really murky, but slightly murky.
Isn't it incredible how each discipline can learn from the other? I mean, I know so much more about all kinds of fishing. I didn't start fly fishing till '92, but I've learnt so much more about other fishing through fly fishing and like the way that fish interact.
Yes.
And we've got some astonishing bit of film here that I know you shot underwater. Now this really intrigues me because it's not so much what you can see. It's what you can't see until you really look. And there you can see a big old pike in the middle, hiding under that log.
Yes.
So he's camouflaged as a log. Looks like he's eating a carp there because his tail looks to be sticking out of his mouth.
Look at the top left-hand corner.
Top left-hand corner. See that shoal of small fish. Now, they're a couple of metres away from him.
Yeah, possibly even closer to that. You know, they're very, very close. And I watched him for a long period of time, and it was interesting because, obviously, pike, eyes in the front, binocular vision, they can focus. Yeah. But what they can't do is see behind them. Yeah. So as a result, that ball of roach literally just sat behind it and went around, and whenever he moved, they went round as well.
But all on that same kind of level. Yes. And you were mentioning how important it is to get the levels right. So just if I can go back to the zigs,
yes.
Would you, if you're fishing 2 rods or 3 rods even, would you have them all at the same depth or would you taper them?
No, I'd alternate. And the first thing I'd say to people is if you've not zig fished before, go out, take all 3 rods, don't take any bait, just take zigs. And that makes you fish zigs. So for a start, you can start off doing that. I would fish 2 on black, and I'd have 1 with that little red on as well, just for the visual side of things. Yeah. And I'd start from below the surface by about 2 foot going down to about 4 foot. So go 2 foot below, 3 foot below and 4 foot below.
Yeah.
And then try it for an hour, then have a recast. So you're fishing the same rods at the same depths, but in different places. Because remember, the bottom goes up and down. And I hear so many people turn around and go, oh, I did it on a zig. How deep was it? Oh, it was on a 6 foot zig. The important thing is how deep was the water, exactly. Yeah. And it's not how far you are off the floor, it's how far below the surface that's the key point. And once you've found where they are, if they're 4 foot below the surface, if you can find a gravel bar that's 4 foot below the surface,
they'll be on the bottom.
You'll have them on the deck.
And you stick a bit of food there, can't you?
Common sense.
See, I've been misquoted lots and lots of times by saying start with your zig at 8 foot.
Yes.
And the reason why I've said that is when I've been on the big reservoirs, for example, if you go around with a fish finder, something I've not done very often, but I've been on people's boats that have got fish finders, the number of times in deep, deep water, fish are 8 foot deep. Now, obviously, in a lake that's 6 foot deep, they can't be 8 foot deep because they have miners helmets on. So that's out of the question. But it's that comfort zone just seems to be 8 foot in bottomless water, let's say.
Go on to our thirds. We spoke about thirds earlier. And in the winter, well, cold stuff sinks, warm stuff rises, very, very basically. So when the water is cold, what happens is it sinks down towards the bottom of the lake until it reaches 4 degrees. 4 degrees, it's at its densest. When it gets any colder, it starts to rise up again. How do we know? Put a piece of ice in a glass of water, you'll see it float on the surface. So where that cold water is sitting, the top of the bottom third is a lot of the time the most comfortable depth as far as temperature consistency is concerned. Now come to the surface, it's warmer, but also it cools down quicker overnight. So in the afternoon it's lovely and warm, in the morning it's quite cold. So the top of the bottom of the top third, or the top of the middle third, at this time of year is a great place to start off. So work on the rule of thirds. If they're off the deck, that's where they're likely to be, somewhere there or thereabouts.
See, I never thought physics would do me any good in fishing. Obviously, I was wrong. Same as geography. I didn't realise how much weather was involved. Now, you've got a lot of responsibility now.
Yes.
You're manager of Carp Team England.
Yes.
What does that entail?
Everything.
Really? Oh, you're chief cook and bottle washer?
Absolutely everything, yes. When the Angling Trust approached me, they said we'd be interested in you taking over. Obviously, Ian Huntingdon and Pete Holhouse had been in seat for the previous 3 years. They said, would you be interested in taking over? I said the same thing. What does that entail? And they said, well, basically everything. We have no money. We have no sponsors. We have effectively to start from scratch with regards to team building, etc., etc., etc. It's an unpaid voluntary position, as a lot of them are in the Angling Trust.
You don't need the money.
So, well, no, what I want is a gold medal.
Yeah.
That is the ambition.
It's more important.
Infinitely more important. Infinitely more important. So it's actually everything. Yeah. And the first thing that I've had to do is try and pull everybody together to get lots of support for the team. And I must say the trade have been remarkable. Absolutely remarkable. Excellent. Almost everybody's come together and said, yeah, we'll throw some money in at you. Let's
fantastic. Do it. See, we think of ourselves, don't we, as world leaders in carp fishing, but the South Africans have got their methods of fishing and their baiting principles are very different to ours. Yet the Eastern Europeans are really up front in carp fishing and they're teaching us things. And we, you know, we're like cricket, innit? Oh, we invented the game, we're going to be best at it. It's not always the case.
No, absolutely not. And you can liken the carp team to the international float team. And also the feeder team as well, because in the UK, a lot of our fishing is done on commercials in the match fishing scene. And you know what? It's exactly the same in the carp scene. Whereas overseas, they don't have commercial lakes. There's one or two.
In a different type of commercial.
Exactly. Well, what we would class as carp commercials, so they don't have pay lakes. There will be one or two places that they can go and they can pay for a day ticket, but most of the time they're on big venues, they're on wild venues, they're on natural venues, and we don't do that sort of fishing anymore. So as a result, we've got to brush up on it.
Where is it this year?
It's in Spain.
In Spain.
It's on the River Ebro at Casp. So it's an area we know a little bit about. I'm not going to say anything at all as yet, but yes, I'll be out recceing it.
Oh, one thing you need for sure, mate, are ways of avoiding catfish because you know they can be an absolute nightmare. And I know how they avoid carp, but avoiding catfish is something very, very different indeed. And I wish you all the best with that, mate.
Thank you.
That's it for today. Thanks to Rob for his insights, and thanks to you. I hope you've learnt a thing or two. Make sure you follow us on Twitter. Remember, Fordy's Tweetomania updates tomorrow and Wednesday. Check out the website for films and information. And of course, please keep your young angler photos coming in on email. Sea fishing takes centre stage next Friday, when my guest will be Scottish international boat specialist Steve Souter. We're on at 6 o'clock on Sky Sports 4. We're available on demand every week as well in the Sky Sports section of Catch Up. Have a great week wherever you're fishing. Tight line. Thanks, mate.
Cheers, very good. Pleasure as ever.
I've learned loads, I'll tell you. Loads.
Enjoy Sky Sports Live. On all screens, on the go, and the best bits on demand.